Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPa here again, and today I wanted to talk about the difficulty of Armored Core 6, which is definitely a hot button topic right now with the community. You've got some people saying the game is just far too difficult, even going so far as to return the game entirely, which is kind of crazy to me because I think it is a very, very good game. And then you've got other folks saying that the game is just far too easy for a From Software and Armored Core title, and I think there's an answer in between those two that a lot of people are missing, and there's reasons why the game might feel easier or harder for you specifically, depending on how familiar you are with the franchise, how much research you do into builds and all that kind of good stuff. So I wanted to jump into all that and give my reasoning why I think the game might feel one or the other for you specifically. So first off, I am a more casual Soulsborne From Software type of player. I've played some Armored Core games in the past, but I'm not a die-hard player. I'm not someone who's played every Soulsborne game. I played a bit of Elden Ring, but even then I played with a more magic-based build, so a lot of people wouldn't consider me a traditional Soulsborne type player. So because of that, I don't traditionally do more challenging content unless I have to, and as far as Armored Core goes, it feels like a game that is difficult but can be mitigated by builds. However, one of the things you can't do, like you can in Elden Ring specifically, is go out and find a good build right off the jump and then go and then do the main campaign and all the main progress at that point. You can go find things that are overpowered right from the very beginning of the game in Elden Ring. Whereas in Armored Core, you definitely have to go through some steps in order to get the perfect build down, in order to get better weapons and all that kind of good stuff. It doesn't take long necessarily, but it does take a bit of skill to get to that point. And so some people who are starting off, who may not be traditional Armored Core players, might have a hard time getting to that point, especially when you're reading some of the different weapons and upgrades and core parts and seeing like, okay, this should be an upgrade, but then you don't know how to min-max. Armored Core has traditionally been known as a spreadsheet simulator, and so folks will kind of tinker with every little piece of their Armored Core mech and find the perfect build. Now, with the day and age of YouTube right now, that is easier than ever. You don't need a spreadsheet. You can just go online and find your perfect build that somebody else has created for you if you want to. And so I feel like a lot of people who are saying maybe the game is too easy have been using builds they've seen on YouTube or online in other places. Whereas if you go in blind, I do find that the game is rather difficult still, especially if you're a player who is either new to the franchise, who is new to Soulsborne games in general, or just struggles with these more difficult types of content overall. And so because of that, that's where the disconnect really lies. With a game like Elden Ring, you can find a way to mitigate some of the difficulty right away. Whereas with Armored Core, it takes a little bit more time and it takes a more precise build. Whereas with, like, again, Elden Ring and games like that, you can swap some things in and out and still have an effective build to use. With Armored Core, everything needs to be working in sync. You need the right weight, you need the right defense, you need everything to be working well together. And so folks who have a perfect build, whether they found it online, whether they made it themselves, are going to just find the game so much easier than those who are playing through for the first time and might have a build that is not min-maxed to the nth degree. For example, you can find a build that is going to be successful, but maybe it's not going to be as overpowered as some other options. And that's really one of the big differences, I think, from we've seen with past Armored Core games, is the internet has just completely changed the availability of broken things. So somebody is going to find whatever is overpowered, is broken, is ridiculously strong as soon as possible. Did anyone believe that double shotguns were going to be super effective in this game? I don't think so, but after testing and seeing people use them, they can be very, very good in this game. And I think a lot of people would have not have realized that or not have even tried them out if it wasn't for the internet and builds and YouTube and the like. So I think that plays a big part of it, and people don't seem to realize how big of a factor that is with the level of difficulty that people are experiencing. You can go through this game completely blind, and I think it is challenging. If it's not challenging, then once you get to New Game Plus and New Game Plus 2, that's really where the difficulty will start to ramp up as well. And sometimes that's a fair enough thing, is you want to have a balance. This is where developers are struggling, I think, at times right now. You want to have that balance between difficulty right at launch, as far as having players who are challenged right from the beginning of the game, versus having a game that is completable by as wide a range as possible, but then also having those additional difficulty options, the New Game Plus and Plus 2, that are going to really challenge those hardcore players who might find the base game a little bit too easy. And that's something that I think people, again, should keep in mind. Games need to have the ability to be completed by a wide range of people, if at all possible, in order to make them appeal to as broad a base as possible. It doesn't need to appeal to everybody. I think Armored Core 6 is still rather difficult, but overall, that is a fine line to walk, and that's something that I don't really envy developers all that much, because it is so difficult to kind of juggle that, whether you want to make a game supremely difficult and then only a fraction of players are actually going to complete it, versus making a game that is going to challenge the top level players but allow for a lot more people to actually be able to enjoy the game. And that's something where From Software has been threading the needle recently, and it's been rather tough for them to navigate, for sure. You've seen it with Elden Ring. I think Elden Ring is a perfect example of a challenging game, one that New Game Plus, you can ramp up the difficulty quite a bit, versus the base game, when you can have silly builds that can trivialize some of the content, even though some of the bosses are not going to be susceptible to every single build. And the real downside for this whole thing for me is that with Armored Core 6, I was hoping that you would need to really mix and match your builds depending on the level and also the boss, to make the challenge either easier or harder, run the build that you kind of want to. But if different builds were having more success against certain bosses, and you couldn't just have 1 or 2 or 3 builds carry you through the entire game, I feel like that would be a bit more enticing for and encourage the exploration of builds as well. But that's just a personal preference, and something that I think is kind of a tough balancing act to thread, essentially, for the developers. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, helps me out tremendously. Shows you want to see more Armored Core 6 content from me. I just wanted to weigh in on this because I think it is an interesting topic, and there's more to it than meets the eye. My name is Jopa. I hope you have a good one. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Have a good one. I'll catch you all later.